In the year 1775, the British colonies along the Atlantic seaboard separated themselves from their mother country. And on April the 19th of that same year, in the town of Lexington, Massachusetts, a historic shot was fired. It has since been immortalized as the shot heard round the world. And although to this day no man knows if it was fired by the colonists or the English, that shot was the beginning of this great nation's fight for independence. In Lexington, the center of revolt against the king, the colonists were trying hard to bring an independent way of life to this their promised land. It was there in Lexington they made their stand. In Lexington, the colonists had flown into a rage. The king had sent one General Thomas Gage to make their military stores the target of his run, but he suffered heavily in Lexington. The American War for Independence had begun. The colonists spread the word to their Whig elements, and they immediately responded to the alarm. In a few days, some 16,000 townsmen, hell-bent for independence, gathered together to form the nucleus of the colonial forces that would carry the war through. Gage had been stopped at Lexington, thanks to the warning made famous by the midnight ride of Paul Revere and the assistance he got from Mr. William Dawes. With Gage and the British troops out of Boston, it gave the colonists a chance to group their forces. And after they had done so, the Continental Congress, acting on behalf of the 13 colonies, appointed a young man from Virginia by the name of George Washington, Commander-in-Chief of the colonial forces, thus preparing the colonists for the siege of Boston and the still famous Battle of Bunker Hill. The die was cast, the line was drawn, the forts were built, they built them strong, as Washington got ready for the Battle of Bunker Hill. The king had sent his generals 3 to overcome the colonies. It was then and there they fought the bloody Battle of Bunker Hill. There were Generals William Howe and Henry Clinton and John Burgoyne. Though Washington had been delayed, his fighting General Prescott carried on. Though blood was shed and lives were lost, the colonies, they paid the cost. And though they tried, they fought and lost the Battle of Bunker Hill. Although the colonies technically lost the Battle of Bunker Hill, that battle cost the British over a third of their troops and made it possible for Washington to gather up some extra arms and hit Boston 2 weeks later, causing the British to evacuate. It also gave the colonies a little bit more faith and confidence in knowing they had the strength and means to continue their fight for independence. When the American forces under Washington came in and took over Dorchester Heights, the British General William Howe up and hightailed it for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Run, General, run! There is no way to stop the march of freedom.
Run, 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 run.
An independent way of life will win. The right of life and liberty and pursuit of happiness is a right that God has given all good men. Is a right that God has given all good men. These were the words the colonies were screaming, and on July the 4th, 1776, a group of men got together and signed a very important document that had been prepared by a farmer and part-time lawyer by the name of Thomas Jefferson. 56 men representing the 13 colonies put their name at the bottom of this document that formally notified the King of Britain that they were declaring their independence as the United States of America. There were doctors, lawyers, farmers, merchants, and one Presbyterian clergyman. From the corners of the colonies, they came to carry out their noble plan. Their hopeful hearts were strengthened by the promises and dreams that only a life of independence brings. So with steady hands they signed their name to the document that denounced the king. There was Lyman Hall, Gwinnett and Walton, Hooper, Hughes and Penn and Rutledge too. Then Hayward, Lynch, and Middleton, and Samuel Chase, they all knew what to do. Then Braxton, Morris, Rush, and Franklin, Morton, Clymer, Smith, and Taylor, Wilson, Ross, and Richard Henry Lee. Then someone shouted, "Here, I'll put my John Hancock on there, big enough to see." So one by one, they vowed their sacred honor by the signing of their names. All 56 of them, including Reed and Stockton, Witherspoon and Payne. Then Hopkinson and Hart and Clark, then Bartlett, Jerry, Whipple, Adams, Walcott, Sherman, all their names were there. Then as the final touch, the last to sign was Tom McKean of Delaware. With the signing of the Declaration, the war for independence really got into full swing. In the year 1775, prior to the signing, a couple of incidents took place that would have an important bearing on the fighting yet to come. A small band of men under the command of Colonel Ethan Allen surprised the British and captured Fort Ticonderoga, the key to the passage of Lake George and Lake Champlain into Canada. For their efforts, they got a valuable supply of cannon. However, Colonel Benedict Arnold and General Richard Montgomery weren't quite as successful when they tried to capture Quebec. They met complete defeat, and General Montgomery paid with his life. Many colonial prisoners were lost to the British, and Benedict Arnold finally withdrew from Canada. So with only partial success from their Canadian campaign, the colonies faced a most difficult struggle, the bloody campaign of 1776. The blood was running deep and getting deeper. and the British knew they'd have to change their plan to whip the kind of men they'd been a-fighting, the kind who'd give his life to save his land. They had to split the colonies across the middle. New England numbered near 1 million strong. So the job to cut them off was undertaken by Carlton Howe, General John Burgoyne. From Halifax to New York town, old General Howe came sailing with reinforcements. He had men to spare. But Washington, one jump ahead, had done marched in from Boston. And when Howe arrived, he found him waiting there. But the British controlled the waters round Manhattan. So once again, old George would fail to win. 'Cause 20,000 British drove him right back into Brooklyn, and it cost another 1,400 men. White Plains and Harlem Heights, they brought no victory. Fort Washington was far the worst defeat. For near 3,000 prisoners were lost by Washington as they licked their wounds and made a fast retreat. But by the grace of God, they never stopped their fight for freedom, and the cause for which they fought erased their fear. But tables turned, and soon they got their taste of victory, while hastily advancing to the rear. As Washington retreated from Manhattan, at Trenton, followed close by Colonel Rawl, he turned around, attacked, and took 1,000 British prisoners in the year of '76, late in the fall. The next week brought another rousing victory when Washington had crossed the Delaware. He took his weary troops and outmarched Cornwallis at Trenton, and 3 strong British regiments fell to him there. Washington marched on to Morristown and made camp on the flank of the British advance in New Jersey, ending the first major campaign under the newly signed Declaration of Independence. The taste of victory the Americans got at the end of the 1776 campaign helped them to overlook the great losses they had suffered. It's a fortunate thing that they didn't know what lay in store for 1777. The price for liberty would be high. A great string of defeats were lying in wait for the Americans. After the occupation of New York, the British General Howe headed out to capture Philadelphia. Coming in by sea, he started his troops at the head of the Chesapeake and marched them up into Pennsylvania, where Washington made a valiant but unsuccessful attempt to stop them at the Battle of Brandywine. The muskets fired, the cannons roared, and when the smoke had cleared away, they found the bodies of the countless men who died for liberty there on the ground. Another page in history was written, and fate to Washington had not been kind. But he held his head up high as he retreated from the Battle of Brandywine. Not too long after, Washington directed a well-planned attack on the British camp at Germantown, but met with the same results that he had suffered at Brandywine. Then John Burgoyne came marching down from Canada to occupy Albany. On his way down, he drove the Americans under the command of General St. Clair out of Ticonderoga, and then proceeded on to Fort Edward on the Hudson. Who knows what his next move would have been had he known that waiting just around the corner was his meeting with General Gates at the Battle of Saratoga. Now General John Burgoyne and his 8,000 men went marching in September. The grueling miles and 40 brand new bridges that he built were left behind. The trip down through Fort Edward on the Hudson River he would long remember. But with his orders in his hands, he had but one thing burning in his mind. He had left 1,000 men behind the garrison at Fort Ticonderoga. And with his rations running low, he knew he had to get to Albany. But he made a bad mistake when he decided to pitch camp at Saratoga. 'Cause Horatio Gates and his 12,000 men were camping just 4 miles away. In the midst of all that shelling, John Burgoyne just stood there yelling for his reinforcements, but they never came. To a man so used to winning, all his woes were just beginning, 'cause Horatio Gates would beat him at his game. Still thinking he would win, old John Burgoyne took 1,500 men patrolling. But Arnold, who would soon become a traitor, met him there and ran him down. As he retreated, Gates and 20,000 men came in with cannons rolling. And that cool October morning found Burgoyne with Gates' brave soldiers all around. It was there at Saratoga John Burgoyne put up his army for surrender. It was there at Saratoga where they handed him the terms of his defeat. It was there at Saratoga General Gates was hailed America's defender. It was there Burgoyne would start to hate the day that he and Gates had had to meet. Burgoyne's capture and surrender at Saratoga was a major turning point in the war. Shortly thereafter, the Americans signed an alliance with France, shortly followed by the addition of Spain and Holland. The British, seeing that they weren't making any headway in the north, decided to direct a campaign against the southern colonies. So now the southern colonies would have to make their bid for independence. So now they rose to arms to show the world that they would gladly do their share. Although their scattered forces made it hard for them to fight, one thing was certain: the British sure would know a strong desire for liberty was living there. Yes, these southern colonies were destined to lose many battles. General Robert Howe would lose Savannah to the British Colonel Archibald Campbell. Augusta would also fall to Campbell. British General Augustine Prevost came up from Florida and drove General Benjamin Lincoln out of Georgia to Charleston, South Carolina. Henry Clinton sailed down from Newport, Rhode Island with 8,500 men to join Prevost, Cornwallis, and Lord Rawdon, where they attacked Charleston and forced Lincoln to surrender. Then, following the submission of South Carolina, the British then headed into North Carolina. The southern colonies would more than likely have been completely destroyed had it not been for American antagonists such as Gates, Nathanael Greene, Lafayette, Sumter, and the notorious Francis Marion the Swamp Fox. In Berkeley County, South Carolina, bright and early, one December morn, as quiet as the falling snow, another page in history was born. In a cabin in the backwoods there, a crying mother gave birth to a son. The pioneers and all the world would know him soon as Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox. As a boy, he learned the secrets that were in the depths of that forbidden land. As he hunted round the countryside, he'd move just like a shadow, till the rugged life he lived made him a man. He learned to strike, then disappear from all the fights he had with the Cherokee. And then he was commissioned as a captain at the age of 43. He defended Charleston Harbor, got the rank of colonel, then dropped out of sight. And he made the swamp his home and just came out to teach the British wrong from right. This old Swamp Fox, though the British tried to get him, he just kept on adding victories to his name. There was Hanging Rock in '96 and Rocky Mountain, Parker's Ferry, killing British like it was a game. He fought the British till the war was over, then he settled down. A cunning fox who served his country well, he lived to die in his hometown. The Swamp
The
Fox,
Swamp Fox,
the Swamp Fox,
the Swamp Fox,
the Swamp Fox,
the Swamp Fox,
that old Swamp Fox. Many battles were yet to be fought, many to be won and lost by both sides. Many brave men would make the supreme sacrifice for the sake of liberty. A mighty tug of war was in the making. Cornwallis was a mighty man to face. In 4 successive battles he emerged in victory, but America would not give up the race. Lafayette and Gates and Greene and Washington were beaten, but when asked to end the war, they made it clear they wouldn't quit till freedom had been won, and their weary troops came charging back for more. They made their answer plain at Kings Mountain, North Carolina, and at Cowpens to the south the colonies would win again. Cornwallis watched our fight for freedom cut his army down. It now numbered less than 2,000 men. Cornwallis thought he had overrun Virginia, so freedom once again would stand the test. He marched to Petersburg and Fredericksburg and Charlottesville, and from there he moved to Yorktown to rest. When Washington came marching into Yorktown, Cornwallis saw he had no place to go. Two mighty forces now combined to fight for liberty, when Washington was joined by Rochambeau. Cornwallis saw the march for liberty come into view. It was then he saw that there was nothing left that he could do. He knew the time had come at last that freedom would prevail, so he surrendered in the year of '82. Articles of peace were signed on November the 30th, 1782, and the final treaty was completed on September the 3rd, 1783. Many brave men walk that long, bloody road, thinking not of the toil and the strife. Their life and the lives of the ones that they loved were pledged to this new way of life. Honor Old Glory as a sign of our thanks to our fathers who so willingly gave their lives and their fortunes to build this great land of the